Hello and welcome. Tonight it's the 5th of April, around 9 p.m. West Coast time, and I'm going to do a quick update on uh, coronavirus cases, COVID-19 cases in the United States by county as we enter what many officials are calling crucial weeks of the coronavirus fight. And I underlined weeks because I don't think it'll be one or even two, it'll be weeks. So let's get right to it. We're going to play an old game in Sesame Street called which one of these things is not like the other. Fauci, U.S. struggling to get outbreak in check. Surgeon General hardest and the saddest week ahead. Trump favors unproven drug mix over ventilators. I'll give you a hint. Expert, non-medical expert. Um, this is just the specifics of the claims that Trump keeps making about the anti-malarial drug and the antibiotic combination. Anyway, Fauci specifically warned against this on Fox News and said further studies are needed. We still need to do the definitive studies to determine whether any intervention, not just this one, is truly safe and effective. So in his mind, we don't know if this is safe or effective. And it's a little, I think, problematic to be promoting it as a healthcare policy as a president without any support for that. So I mentioned this because each state is expected to peak use of their coronavirus pandemic. That was based on the Christopher some letter Murray model, and they had been updating it every day. Surprisingly, on April 1st to 2nd, they made a big change and upped their death total from 81,000, to 95,000. And then the next day, they said, well, we're going to update it on the 3rd, we're going to update it on the 4th, and now it just says we're going to update it sometime. So they've gone from daily updates, which they were doing here, the 30th, 31st, the 1st, the 2nd, and then the estimate started to change, and magically they haven't done an update in 3 days. That's probably just a coincidence. I'm sure there's no reason that their model's not performing well. New York Times, currently 336,000 cases, 9,631 deaths. Speaking of performing well, this is my model from the other day. I had data through April 3rd. Today's the 5th. I predicted 10,456 accumulated deaths by now. I was wrong. It's 9,631. It is within my confidence interval. Both yesterday and today are, but it's on the lower end. So it'll be interesting to see whether this continues to drift below my lower bound. And that all has to do with the fact that, as you recall, there was some deceleration in the rate of deaths as it was going up that exponential curve. And so we'll see if that continues and whether I captured the correct rate of deceleration. So I went through every county, all 3,000 some odd of them, and looked at the number of cases and looked at the growth rate of the number of cases in the last week, and scored them both on number of cases and growth rate, and came up with sort of a sort of really bad, pretty really bad, really sort of really bad, and bad. So these are the worst of the worst, these bright red dots. So there's this thing going on here that's not just New Orleans, but all of southern Mississippi and into Louisiana here. There's a whole bunch of counties there that are just having terrible problems. We know about Michigan, but it's actually expanding up into, I don't know if that's Saginaw or Flint and Port Huron, but it's getting outside of Detroit. This looks like this could be getting to Gary, Indiana, or Fort Wayne or something. Of course, we have the whole northeastern corridor, which we knew to expect, right? And then there's that's LA. Not sure what that's about. Those must be fast-growing counties because they're not big yet. And then South Florida we knew about as well. So then I added to that the ones that were in the second tier, and these are actually still amazingly problematic, just not as extremely problematic. And so we start filling in all of the counties on the northeast corridor through Philadelphia into Delaware and Maryland, up into Massachusetts, even into southern New Hampshire there. We're filling in more of the counties around Detroit and around the Chicago area. We're getting Indianapolis. We're getting St. Louis. We already talked about that. I don't know why Oklahoma's doing that. I haven't looked further. And then we're adding a third group. Let's go back. So I'm going to add the third group here, which again, in a normal circumstance would be considered really terribly fast-growing epidemics, but compared to some of our really worst counties, they're not that bad yet. And you'll see that some of them fill in, and there's a lot of yellow dots. So the ones that aren't doing really, really, really bad in the Northeast tend to be doing bad. And then again, same down here, we're filling in a lot of those things. So this is just an incredible hotspot right now that I think is going to be devastating. And this is the second one, and I think the third one right now is there relative to the rest of the country. And then I added some final ones, which were, they're even lighter yellow. I don't know if you can see. So I took the red and the orange, not all the yellows, and I just listed them by state, alphabetically, and by county, so that they would be up here. And remember, there are two criteria being merged together for being on here. One is high numbers, the other is fast growth. So if you had 100 or 200 cases and you're growing at a rate where you're doubling every 2 days, you're going to be on this list. And if you have 5,000 cases, even though it may take you 6 days to double, you're going to be on this list. So it's basically the places where the outbreak is either incredibly difficult already and still growing, or in places it's not as numerous yet but growing incredibly quickly. So you'll see here's the whole bunch of counties in Louisiana. It's really quite distressing, actually. Much of New Jersey is in here, New York. Interestingly, it's not just New York City, but there's also Erie in the west part of New York. In Ohio, it's interesting. We haven't seen the big cities light up because they're not doing great, but they're not growing that fast. Philadelphia is that part of that northeastern corridor. Miami-Dade, Florida, Orange, Palm Beach, they're all in that area. No, actually, Orange is a little further north. I take it back. San Bernardino is in the list. It's in Southern California, but sort of north of Riverside, and it's growing very fast. Los Angeles is in here because it has a high number. So that's just a list of counties. There's no magic to this. The formula for putting together the two types of information was reasonable. It was using a standardized criteria and adding them together and blah, blah, blah. But there's no magic to where red turns to orange and orange turns to yellow. I just tried to give you a sense of where some of the hot spots were. So going back to the graphic, that's where the worst of the worst is right now. The Northeast Corridor, smattering throughout the entire Midwest and South, much less so in the center of the area. When I said rural Idaho, what I really meant was you should be in the rural Dakotas. They seem to be doing fairly well, but that cluster is really dramatic. I've already shown you the fact that we're still waiting for updates. Until yesterday, they had this please check back on Saturday, April 4th for our next update, and then Saturday night around 11:50 p.m. it disappeared, and it just stops there. Please check back while we are working to incorporate new data. Actually, it doesn't even say please check back at all. And I thought this was fascinating too, because some of those governors are ones that Trump has taken swipes at, but they've done, I think, an incredible job taking some leadership roles in their states, in Michigan and in New York in particular. And it's quite interesting because I think that most of the experts looking at this have been much more impressed with the state-by-state response to the crisis in many states, not all, than the federal ability to support the states. So I think I'll go back to my final graphic and leave it at that. Thank you.